All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're tackling a really big question, one that sits right at the heart of the modern world. For more than 1,000 years, Islam was the foundation for some incredibly stable, ordered civilizations. So, what happened? How did it get so tangled up with the idea of violence and chaos that we hear about all the time? Let's dig in. And really, that is the question, isn't it? It frames this whole explainer. On one hand, you've got this long, long history of principled societies. On the other, well, you see the headlines. The source we're looking at makes a really bold claim that for most of its history, this kind of mass terror was just not a thing in the Islamic world. It was totally alien. So the question remains, what on earth changed? To get to the bottom of it, the source we're examining first takes us way back to what it calls the Long Peace. And the argument is that for over a millennium, there was a specific spiritual tradition that was the absolute key to Islam's stability. I mean, you really have to let that number sink in for a second. 1,300 years. This wasn't some minor movement. We're talking about the mainstream, the engine that produced societies governed by restraint, by deep scholarship, and by a really powerful moral discipline all across the known world. So who are the people keeping this long peace going? Well, the source points a finger directly at the Sufis. And look, it's not talking about some kind of fringe, mystical group out in the desert. No, the argument here is that they were the spiritual backbone of the faith. Their whole focus was on something called adab, which is this really deep sense of proper conduct, of ethics. The core idea was simple but powerful. You have to purify your own heart before you even think about trying to change the world. And that focus on inner work, plus building actual institutions, that's what the source says allowed Islam to spread so peacefully for centuries. And this quote just nails it. It really gets to the core principle. According to the source, the goal was never to grab political power for themselves. It was to discipline the self. And that internal self-control, that soul-level governance, is what ended up disciplining society as a whole and putting a check on anybody who got too hungry for power. Okay, so if that was the winning formula for 1,300 years, what went so wrong? The source points squarely at the last century or so, arguing that a series of massive disruptions basically blew a hole right through the fabric of religious authority. You can see the domino effect right here on this timeline. First, you have these traditional institutions that had guided things for centuries. They get weakened badly by colonial powers. Then brand new nation-states pop up and take control of religion for themselves. And finally, you've got this huge vacuum of authority, and a bunch of new politically charged ideologies came rushing in to fill that void. So this brings us to the new voices that started shouting in that vacuum. And according to the source, these movements didn't get their influence from centuries of scholarship and wisdom. Nope, they got it from modern politics and a whole lot of money. The first major ideology the source calls out is Wahhabism. It's described as this really rigid, literalist movement that basically threw out all the rich spiritual traditions that came before it. The focus suddenly shifted from inner mercy to outward control, and it was really, really quick to label other Muslims as heretics if they didn't fall in line. Next up, the source dives into modern Salafism. Now, it's related, but it's a much broader movement. And it is absolutely crucial to say that not all Salafists are violent. But the source argues that by rejecting that deep spiritual training and the history of scholarship, the movement can create a really dangerous mix. Absolute certainty with no wisdom to guide it. And when you combine that certainty with political anger, well, you've got fertile ground for radicalization. So, this is the crucial point, according to our source. It isn't just a fight between different labels or names. It's way deeper than that. It's about a fundamental difference in what each path is trying to create. What kind of person comes out the other side? Okay, this slide right here, this is the whole ballgame. It really gets to the core of the argument we're exploring. On the left, you've got the traditional path. The goal, to build character. It's all about working on yourself, from the inside out. It values things like patience, mercy, humility. The result, the source says, is a kind of spiritual light. Now, look at the other side, ideology. The goal isn't character, it's certainty. It works outward, trying to control things. And its values? Rigidity, hostility, this feeling of being superior. The end result? A kind of darkness that pretends it's clarity. A huge, huge difference. So, if this peacekeeping tradition is still around, why don't we hear from it more often? It's a fair question, and the source has a pretty clear idea about what the path forward looks like. And here's why those voices get drowned out. I mean, think about it. The traditional path is quiet. It doesn't shout slogans. It doesn't give you a simple bad guy to blame for everything. Instead, it asks for something way harder, to look at yourself, to critique yourself before you start critiquing the world. And let's be honest, in our modern world of instant outrage and 24/7 news cycles, that kind of depth is just inconvenient. So what's the fix? The source is really clear on this. The answer is not censorship. It's education. But not just any education. It has to be education with historical honesty, getting back to understanding the actual, documented history of the faith, not some modern, distorted version. And what does that mean? It means teaching the history of the people who actually kept the faith alive for centuries, the people who built societies, not militias, the leaders whose main message was mercy, not terror, and who taught that the most important thing you can do is train your own heart before you ever dare to open your mouth. Now, the source we're looking at wraps up with a very, very direct and pointed claim. And I'm going to read this one word for word so it's clear this is coming directly from the text. It says, "The religion cannot find peace unless this country, Saudi Arabia, commits to a plan. The world must hold them accountable or nothing will change." I mean, wow, that is a powerful final statement, right? It places the responsibility for change squarely on a single nation state. And that brings us to the final really provocative question our source leaves us with. It's not just about understanding how things went wrong. The real question is, when are we going to start listening to the voices that actually kept the peace for over 1,000 years? It's a powerful thought to end on.